The forest breathed in long, patient intervals, as though it were an ancient creature waking from a half-remembered dream. Ghost moved through it with the certainty of someone who had memorized every contour, every brittle twig, every shift of wind between the pines. His skull-like mask reflected nothing, swallowing what light dared touch it. He preferred it that way. The mask had become his final boundary. What remained of the man beneath was reserved for necessity alone. Tonight, necessity pressed close. He stopped near a cluster of spruce where the needles curled inward unnaturally, as if recoiling from heat. Squatting, he touched the soil with 2 fingers. It was warm, disturbingly so, and a razor-thin line of char cut through the dirt with surgical precision. It hadn't been made by fire. Fire was wild, impulsive. This was deliberate, a mark left by something that understood control. Ghost straightened slowly, letting the tension in his shoulders settle into readiness. He had felt this kind of wrongness once before. Years ago, on a night when the sky erupted in silent light and left him staring at a darkness too profound for explanation. Most people forgot extraordinary events quickly. He never had that luxury. His memory had become a tool, a warning, and sometimes a quiet sentence he carried alone. Tonight, that memory stirred again. He lifted his rifle and scanned the tree line. Fog drifted among the trunks in sinuous ribbons, forming silhouettes that dissolved whenever he tried to anchor them. The forest wasn't hiding anything malicious. It was simply unsettled, as if disturbed by something it couldn't interpret. Ghost trusted the forest's unease more than any human report. The land had its own language, one he had learned to read through wounds, storms, and long nights spent listening instead of speaking. A faint tremor rippled through the air. Ghost turned his head slightly, catching the vibration with the same instinct that once kept him alive on battlefields far from home. The sound was subtle, too uniform to be natural, too smooth to be a machine he recognized. It moaned through the branches like a tuning fork struck by an invisible hand. The forest reacted first. Birds scattered, needles shivered, and distant hollows echoed with disquiet. Ghost slid behind a moss-coated boulder and steadied his rifle. The hum thickened, then split into 2 alternating tones that merged into a descending whine. He knew that sound, though he had heard it only once. Something was landing. Through a break in the fog, a small, luminous shape lowered between the trees. The craft resembled a drop of molten metal suspended in air. Its hull shifted in slow ripples, as though responding to the atmosphere with a predator's intuition. It touched the ground with eerie softness, disturbing not even a pine cone. The hum stopped instantly, leaving a vacuum of silence so complete that even the wind hesitated. Ghost kept his gaze fixed on the craft as a seam opened along its surface. 2 tall figures stepped out, their forms encased in armor that reflected the forest in fractured images. Their movements were disciplined, symmetrical, and almost ritualistic. Helmets shaped like ornate crowns turned as they surveyed the clearing. Each gesture measured with a confidence that suggested familiarity with hostile terrain. They weren't explorers searching for novelty. They were evaluators, officers tasked with judgment. Ghost studied them with a cold, growing certainty. Their arrival wasn't an accident. They were here for a purpose, one intimately tied to the strange anomalies he had tracked over the past months. One officer knelt to examine the charred line in the soil, tapping a slender device that emitted pulses of shifting light. The other scanned the air, its visor flickering with unreadable symbols. Ghost felt the decision forming inside him, heavy but unyielding. They couldn't be allowed to complete whatever mission had brought them here. He tightened his grip on the rifle and inhaled slowly, letting the forest steady him. The first move would matter. The first move always mattered. The officers continued their survey, unaware that the land they measured had already chosen its defender. Ghost retreated into the deeper brush, not out of fear but strategy. The 2 armored beings moved with predatory precision, and he needed to observe them long enough to understand how they thought. Their posture revealed discipline, Their scanning patterns revealed caution, and their synchronized gestures revealed a chain of command too rigid to be improvised. Whatever their mission was, they followed it with unwavering conviction. That alone made them dangerous. He circled wide through the trees, letting the forest swallow him. His ghillie suit merged with the moss and bramble until he became little more than a shifting shadow. The aliens paused occasionally, their helmets tilting with mechanical deliberation. They detected something, but not enough. That meant Ghost's preparations were already working. Earlier, he had scattered thermal decoys across the ridge, small pouches that released warmth gradually, mimicking the signature of a human body. He watched as one alien picked up a faint reading. The creature advanced toward the false heat, analyzing it through a device that resembled a thin, glowing plate. Ghost studied its reaction. No emotional cues. No hesitation. Pure calculation. He filed that away. Creatures without instinctual fear were predictable, and predictability meant exploitable weaknesses. The second alien remained in the clearing, pivoting slowly. Its armor hummed softly, a frequency Ghost could feel more than hear. The vibration carried an unsettling resonance, as if the air itself recoiled from it. He tightened his grip on the rifle, reminding himself that this opponent viewed him as an inferior species. That arrogance could be useful. He repositioned along a slope overlooking the clearing, settling behind a fallen log. The vantage point allowed him to track both targets. The alien investigating the decoy moved farther from its companion, drawn in by the false trail Ghost had deliberately laid. Separation was key. A pair coordinated. A lone target could be neutralized without immediate retaliation. Ghost exhaled slowly. Years of training steadied his hands, but it was his instinct, honed by a past encounter he could never forget, that guided the shot. He waited for the creature to step into an open patch of ground. When it crouched to lift the decoy pouch, he squeezed the trigger. The rifle barked once, sharp and controlled. The bullet pierced the alien's crown-like helmet, shattering it with a flash of emerald fluid. The creature collapsed silently, its limbs folding inward like a machine powering down. Ghost did not admire the kill. He watched the remaining alien instead. The instant its partner fell, the survivor's posture stiffened. It emitted a clipped, metallic sequence of tones before sprinting toward the body. Its movements grew more urgent, almost frantic, not emotional but tactical. It scanned the corpse, then turned its head toward the surrounding forest, calculating vectors. It knew the shooter was near, not precisely, but close enough to change its strategy. The alien activated something on its wrist. Its outline shimmered, then blurred as if the forest behind it leaked into its form. Cloaking. Effective yet imperfect. Ghost tracked the faint distortion moving across the clearing. The creature was trying to flank him, anticipating the angle of his shot. He smiled behind the mask. Good. That meant it understood he was not prey. He slipped backward into the shadows, moving along a ridge where roots tangled like gripping hands. The cloaked alien followed, believing itself invisible. Ghost listened to the subtle displacement of leaves, the faint hum of the creature's armor, the rhythm of something intelligent preparing to kill. He reached a narrow pass between two boulders and knelt, rifle angled. The alien approached the choke point, stepping into the location Ghost had chosen not by accident, but by inevitability. The confrontation was coming. The forest felt it too. By the time the creature crossed into the pass, Ghost had already decided how this would end. The alien emerged from the narrow pass in a shimmering blur, but Ghost had already adjusted for the distortion. He held his breath, watching the subtle warp of branches behind the creature, noting the way light bent around its armor. The cloak hid detail, not presence. Every living thing displaced the air differently, and the forest whispered those small truths to anyone patient enough to listen. Ghost fired a single shot. The bullet struck a stone inches from the alien's head, deliberately missing. The ricochet shattered the cloaking field, revealing the creature in a burst of flickering outlines. He wanted its attention, not its immediate death. The alien recoiled, its armored plates shifting with a metallic hiss. It crouched and scanned the ridge with renewed aggression, its helmet angling sharply as though reprimanding itself for underestimating him. Ghost used that moment to slip downslope, forcing the alien to choose between pursuing him or retreating to reassess. It chose pursuit, confirming what Ghost had begun to suspect. These beings operated with strict duty, but they carried an undercurrent of pride. Pride created openings. He guided the alien into a denser part of the forest where the canopy tangled overhead, suffocating the light. Here, the terrain itself became an ally. Fallen trunks created uneven pathways, and tangled roots shifted under the weight of hasty steps. Ghost moved like a breath of wind, pausing only to trace a fingertip along a tree, trunk scarred by some earlier disturbance. He imagined the aliens marking territory, testing the environment. They believed the world was theirs to categorize. That arrogance rang through every movement they made. A faint crackle behind him announced that the alien had stepped on a dry branch. Ghost didn't turn. He simply sped up, allowing the creature to think it had forced him into retreat. The chase grew tighter, more intimate, each step narrowing the distance between hunter and hunted. Ghost chose his path carefully, weaving through gullies and around boulders shaped by centuries of storms. He needed the alien to follow so deeply that returning to its craft would no longer feel viable. At last, he reached a natural trench formed by erosion. The walls rose steeply on both sides, creating a channel only one body wide. Ghost slid down silently and crouched behind a jutting stone. The alien dropped into the trench seconds later, armored boots clanging against rock. The sound echoed in a way that betrayed uncertainty. It expected movement ahead, but sensed none. Ghost struck from the side, driving his shoulder into the creature's torso with calculated force. The alien stumbled, but recovered with swift, almost elegant precision. It swung an arm, its forearm plates shifting into a serrated edge. Ghost ducked, feeling the blade carve through air just above his head. He countered by slamming the butt of his rifle into the creature's helmet, cracking the smooth surface. A cascade of luminous symbols blinked in disarray across the visor. The alien growled, an electronic, layered sound that carried neither anger nor fear, only frustration at inefficiency. The fight tightened into a brutal rhythm. Ghost avoided the creature's heavy strikes, using the trench's confined space to restrict its movements. He studied its reactions, deliberate, calculated, but increasingly troubled by the unpredictability of its opponent. Ghost's advantage was not superior strength or advanced weapons. It was adaptation. He fought like someone who had learned to survive from the forest itself. He grabbed a loose stone and smashed it into the damaged visor. The helmet finally fractured, sending shards scattering across the trench floor. The alien faltered, blinking with wide, glassy eyes that reflected the dim light. Ghost stepped back, breathing hard, allowing the creature a final moment of comprehension. It understood now that it had misjudged humanity entirely. When the alien collapsed, the trench fell silent. Ghost rested a hand on the fractured helmet, acknowledging the gravity of what he had done. These officers had not come merely to observe. They had come to measure Earth's resistance. Now, one more measure lay still at his feet. He dragged the body toward a towering pine. The forest accepted the offering with solemn stillness. When he hung the shattered helm high among the branches, it swayed like a grim warning to anything watching from above. More would come. He felt it as surely as he felt the cold wind rising. The forest was preparing for a storm, and so was he. The wind sharpened as dusk settled, carrying the metallic scent of the alien's blood through the trees. Ghost stood beneath the pine where the shattered helm swayed, watching the dying light catch on its fractured edges. The forest felt heavier now, as if absorbing the truth he had confirmed. These beings were not isolated wanderers. They were the first touch of something far larger pressing against Earth's borders. The realization steadied him rather than shook him. He had always sensed another encounter would come eventually. The waiting was finally over. He moved toward a ridge overlooking the valley. with the shadows pooled like ink. His boots sank into the soft moss, and every step reminded him of the life he had chosen, quiet, solitary, governed by vigilance rather than comfort. People had once tried to pull him back into ordinary living, insisting that the past should be allowed to fade. But he could never forget the night the sky split open and a stranger's curiosity nearly erased him. Survival had remolded him, carved him into something patient and relentless, a shape the forest understood instinctively. Now, that same instinct urged him to prepare. He knelt beside a hollowed stump and retrieved a small bundle wrapped in tarred cloth. Inside lay fragments scavenged from the fallen aliens, a sliver of armor, a crystalline device that pulsed faintly, and a circular panel etched with shifting symbols. He studied the panel again, tracing a finger across the changing patterns. They were not random. Each shift aligned with the rhythm of the creature's earlier signals. Ghost closed his eyes briefly, letting memory settle. When the surviving officer had stood over its fallen companion, it had sent a transmission, short, clipped, unmistakably urgent. The panel's glow confirmed what he feared. The transmission had been received. He tucked the alien pieces back into the bundle, knowing their value wasn't in understanding the language, but in recognizing the intention behind it. The officers had acted like advanced surveyors, mapping, measuring, cataloging. Their death would not halt their mission. It would escalate it. Earth had answered their arrival with violence, and that answer would shape whatever followed. Ghost rose, sliding the bundle into his pack. His movements remained slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial. Preparation was not panic, but respect for the enemy, for the land, and for the conflict approaching. As he descended the ridge, the night opened around him, clear and cold. Stars glimmered through breaks in the canopy, distant and indifferent. Yet one point of light flickered with an unnatural steadiness. Ghost stopped, narrowing his eyes. The light brightened, then multiplied, forming a thin cluster far beyond the clouds. It shifted in a pattern too organized to belong to any aircraft. He felt the change in the forest before he heard it. A tremor in the branches, a restless stir among the needles. The world sensed an intrusion. He crouched, lifting his rifle and angling the scope toward the sky. A line of glimmering shapes drifted downward, silent and deliberate. Their descent carried the same calculated grace he had seen in the two officers, yet amplified by scale and purpose. A chill traced his spine, not fear but recognition. An advance unit had come. Now the main survey was beginning. Ghost did not retreat. He settled into the undergrowth, adjusting the rifle with practiced ease. His breath steadied, his heartbeat slowed, and the noise of the world softened until only the forest and the approaching lights existed. He had no illusions about the scope of what approached. Earth stood at the threshold of something vast and merciless. But he understood his role with absolute clarity. They had sent officers to judge this world. He had answered with defiance. Now, they were sending more. He exhaled once, slow and sure, and watched the first vessel breach the clouds. Whatever came next, he would meet it the same way he met everything, unseen, unbroken, and unafraid.